This is a powerful book. I read it. I highlighted it all the way through. It's not a hard read. It tells, you've got a true crime background. It tells kind of a true crime story. So it's fascinating from that perspective. Anybody that loves true crime can read this book and get something meaningful out of it. And it reminds me of the unreal things that happened just such a short time ago. It provides a direction, though, which is nice for what we can do to avoid the catastrophe in the future. And I wanted to get it in your words. We'll do 3 segments, the bad, the good, and the beautiful. So tell us, what happened with COVID-19?
John does a wonderful job, in a sense, narrating a story with a beginning, a middle, and the end. The book, it does have flashbacks in history, which I think are extremely useful, that when the medical community historically has been confronted with a new challenge, a novelty, a controversy, the answers have never come from the establishment. They've never come from the orthodoxy.
This is the discovery when you study medical history, is every time mankind has been confronted with something that our medical people don't understand, it's always a creative, discerning individual, maybe working and with some of his discerning colleagues, that discover the way forward. It's not some committee in Washington, D.C.
Well, what's really frustrating to me is I read the book, The Great Influenza, during the pandemic, and The Great Influenza is about the Spanish flu. And I saw so many examples of mistakes that we made again, having known better. I mean, they did masking and isolation and vaccines and all those things, and none of the orthodoxy and the answers that they gave seemed to deal with that. And it seems like, don't we learn anything?
Think about the assumption. The assumption was, if I do all these things, I won't get the illness. Now we have serologic data where virtually every person got SARS-CoV-2 infection. No one dodged it.
So, well, and if I could just add to that, I mean, we should remember that the initial messaging from Washington was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Now, what does that mean, flatten the curve? It means to slow down the rate of hospitalizations so that hospitals won't be overrun. But from the outset, the original messaging was this thing is beyond containment. Everyone is going to be exposed to this. We just want to slow down the rate of serious illness so that hospital capacity...
Well, see, I could buy off on the idea. Let's go home for 2 weeks. Let's stop work for 2 weeks. That's for the social good. I can do that. But if they'd sold it to people, you're going to be locked in your home for 2 years. You won't be able to see ill relatives and even be with them when they die. If they told them, we're not going to allow you to treat this early or do anything about it till you end up in the hospital and then you're probably going to die. If they told us that, we would have had a revolt. But once they isolated us and separated, I interviewed Stella Morabito, who wrote The Weaponization of Loneliness, talking about how when you isolate people, then you can break them down, you can manipulate them, you can control them. It seems like that's what happened.
It's true. Going back to the assumptions. So the next assumption was the virus is unassailable, it's untreatable. From the very beginning, we were told from experts from Washington and in academic medical centers, it's untreatable. What a dangerous assumption, because some people died of this illness. We should never assume it's untreatable from the outset. We ought to say it is treatable, let's try.
Yeah, this is where I examine a theory or an interpretive framework, viewing this in the language of criminal investigations, in this case, organized crime. We have to consider the possibility of, at the bare minimum, negligent homicide. Because in what emergency do you just say, you know, nothing works, we're going to categorically state this from the outset, a priori, nothing works, so don't even try to help people. And in the case of Dr. McCullough, he wasn't proposing to help his patients in some radical way. It was, well, how would you characterize the protocol? What were these agents?
Within a few weeks, we realized there was a viral phase. People got sick, nasal congestion like any cold, but then something changed in the lungs, what's called inflammation or cytokine storm. and then rapidly reports where people are developing blood clots. We've never seen an infection that causes blood clots. That was the unique thing about it, but that was known pretty quickly. So as we sketched out these phases, we need something to manage the virus, something to handle inflammation, and something to manage blood clots.